Welcome to the Emotional Needs Podcast. Listeners, if you are finding yourself in the sugar at night, if you're finding yourself overeating and you feel like you have no control and you're blaming yourself and you're not understanding why, you know exactly what to do, exactly how to eat, but you just can't do it, you are in for a treat today. Today, my guest is Stacey Page, a licensed spiritual practitioner, yoga instructor, and coach. Stacey, I'm really excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
This is going to be such a great conversation for the listeners who've been here for a while. This is going to be a fresh perspective on the things that we talk about. And if you're new, this is a beautiful place for you to start in the podcast. And then you can go back and binge listen because there's so many layers to emotional eating and we can't get to every single one of them, but this is going to be a really good try. I would love, Stacey, as you're thinking about talking with everyone today, what would you like the listeners to feel when we're done with this episode?
In your power, to feel freedom and in your power. I think that one of the things about emotional eating, it's not about eating what's good or bad. It's how do we feel? How do we feel when we're around food? So to leave feeling that we are empowered and free and that we have some tools, right? We have some tools to deal with. I always say grab a tool instead of grabbing food. So hopefully we leave with some tools today that we can implement immediately into our lives.
Good. We are going to have some understanding and we're going to have some tools, and that is a great combination. So, why isn't it enough for women to know what to do? Because we see it all over. We can go online and we literally can get meal plans, we can get ideas, we can be told what to eat, but we cannot implement that in our bodies. Why are we not able to?
Yeah. Women who know what to do but struggle with doing it, we're trying to change the behavior without understanding what's driving the behavior. So the behavior it's an effect of something trying to get our attention, right? Maybe it's emotions that need to be processed, which we can talk about in a little bit as well, and maybe it's a belief. So for me, part of my story, when I was in sixth grade, I had already fully developed. I had breasts, I had hips, and I got a lot of unwanted attention and sexual attention, both verbal and physical. As I was doing my healing work a little bit later on, I put on weight. I was heavy up until my mid to late 20s. I got really sick. I had a health challenge that forced me to go underneath everything and get to the heart of what was going on. So as I was doing my healing work, I realized that I had formed a belief that said that being seen wasn't safe, that being sexy and attractive was going to bring unwanted consequences. So consciously, I was dying for that, right? I'm doing everything with my food and my exercise. I'm trying to control those behaviors to look and feel the way I want to. But beliefs are always going to win. Those subconscious beliefs, which are often hidden from us until we have the awareness of them and choose to look at them. It's literally like having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake.
That is a great analogy. I really like that. Can we dig deeper into limiting beliefs? Because
Yes,
I hear them every day. The things that I love what you said, being seen is not safe. And that is a limiting belief. And many women don't realize that the weight that they're putting on is protection. And that's a tough one. Do you have any thoughts around that? Because I actually have dealt with clients that do that.
I do. So first, just to talk a little bit about beliefs. So beliefs are formed in two ways. When we have a big incident or a series of little incidents, like being sexually abused or receiving that unwanted attention, we'll make some decisions at that point. But the other thing that's important to realize is that the majority of our beliefs are in place by the time that we are 6 years old. So before we even have the ability to discern truth, we've already made some really big decisions about ourselves and the world. So I always look at it like this, like just imagine that you're a little girl and you want to get your mom's attention. You want love from her. You want to share something with her. So you're like, mommy, mommy, but mom's busy. She's on the phone or she's working or she's making dinner. And so she tells you, I'm busy. I don't have time for you right now. Well, that little, 3, 4-year-old girl, it leaves a mark and she makes a decision. Maybe that what she has to say isn't important or that she's not lovable. And then what begins to happen is that every experience similar to that begins to deepen and reinforce this belief that I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy, what I have to say doesn't matter. I'm not worthy of being seen. All those things form that belief, and our beliefs outpicture into our lives. We will never grow beyond our beliefs. So I always say, if we start to see a pattern, if we are always we're dating or marrying the same partner. It can be they just look the same but in a different person. Or if we're switching jobs but we keep getting hit in dead end. Whatever that pattern is, again, we're trying to change in the outer world when really we have to go back and examine and say, what beliefs am I holding? And as soon as we are aware of the beliefs, then we have the ability to change them.
Powerful. And we even have beliefs around the losing the weight and success based on our childhood. I will never be successful. And like you said, my needs don't matter, or I'll never lose weight. I've always tried to lose weight. I can never lose weight. Why try? And they really they stick with you until you unpack. And I feel like it's not even our voice.
A hundred,
Mhm.
a 100%. Because our true voice, our authentic voice, that deep down is we live in this infinite universe and we are infinite beings, right? I always say we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So we have access to as much personal power, as much abundance, as much love and joy as we allow ourselves to have. So we're the ones who limit ourselves based on our beliefs, and they're self-serving. So as you said, I'm never going to lose weight. I can't lose weight. Well, the more we say it, we're just further and further and further reinforcing it. And then again, self-fulfilling. So if we're saying we're never going to lose weight, well, we will do anything and everything to make sure that we're never losing weight. It goes back to that one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake. We're trying so hard, but that subconscious is like, that's a belief. We're never going to grow past our beliefs.
So let's take that to the next step where we end up self sabotaging ourselves. How are we sabotaging ourselves and not even realizing that we're doing that?
So I say that that really does go back to a belief about self worth, right? So if we don't believe that we are worthy of something, if we feel that we don't deserve love or we don't deserve peace or joy or abundance, we again that subconscious is so powerful. So it's going to ensure that we don't allow we're punishing ourselves. We're the ones who are punishing ourselves by holding that belief. So we will continue to make sure that we stuff the food down or, eat the things that are bad to us. And it's bigger than us, right? Which is why willpower isn't going to work because it's bigger than us. We've got to get to the root, whether it's emotions that need to be processed or beliefs that need to be changed. Because here's the thing, we get to choose what we believe. So once we see that we have a limiting belief, and we don't even need to necessarily know exactly what that belief is, we can just be like, oh God, I'm always self-sabotaging. And then we can just choose to have a different belief. We can choose to say, you know what? I'm in my power. You know what? I am worthy of love and having this gorgeous, beautiful body. And then there's steps that we can take to reinforce it. So the same way that a limiting belief got reinforced is the same way that we can choose to put in a new belief. We have to, when we have to pay attention to our thoughts and our words and our actions. And when we see that those are lining up with something that's limiting us or lining us up with something that we don't want to bring in, we have to stop. We have to stop ourselves and then make a change. We have to change the thoughts, we have to change the words, and we have to change the actions. And it's simple but not easy, I always say, right? It's a process. We're very comfortable with these old beliefs. I was a long time ago. I was in a small private plane and we were flying over the Grand Canyon, like kind of the side end of it where private planes can go. And I remember looking down and I thought, that one little river created this huge canyon. And it reminds me of a belief. When we have that one belief, it tracks this huge canyon. So when we want to change it, initially we're kind of like pulling ourselves up, but we're kind of walking on the edge. It's going to be really easy to drop back into the canyon. We have to consciously work with our thoughts, our words, and our actions to create that new groove. And then the good news is it goes on autopilot. Then we don't have to think about it anymore. We are just automatically thinking, acting, and verbalizing things that are going to be for what we choose we want to bring in.
So let's say someone is in the middle of a binge. They are going back and forth, sweet, salty. They're in the pantry Is that the time that they should be thinking about these thoughts, or is there another time that they should be working on the rewiring of the brain?
Yes, that's a great question. So I feel that it is so crucial for us to have a 20 to 30-minute daily practice. I call it a daily spiritual practice. Some people call it a daily mindfulness practice. It's time that we dedicate each day to us, time that we sit with ourselves. We can journal, we can meditate, we can do yoga, we can go out in nature. But once we start establishing that daily practice, now we've given ourselves an outlet to where we can hear our voice. We can have a place for our emotions to be processed. We can have a place that we get to see, oh God, I'm in this pattern again. Like there's something, like what's going on? We give ourselves that outlet. As we do that, we are also in that daily practice. We're doing some different things, and we can talk about what to implement in your daily practice. We need to schedule it in. We need to schedule what we're doing. As we do that more and more, well, now all of a sudden we've created a toolkit. So now when we're in the middle of the binge, we can actually grab a tool. And I'll also say we'll be less likely to go into the binge because when we're doing our daily practice, we become more and more and more responsive to life and life situations versus reactive.
Yes, in that quiet time, why do women find it so hard to settle in and do that 20 to 30-minute quiet time, that spiritual practice?
So I'll say two things. One, it's creating the habit, right? So especially women, we tend to take care of everybody else's needs over our own, which is why I say we have to schedule it in, and we schedule it in with the same priority that we would give our child or our grandchild's doctor's appointment or a work appointment. So once we get in the groove and create the habit within a few weeks, now it becomes easier to settle in and do it. But the other part is that we would oftentimes prefer to quiet the call within than answer the call within because the call within is not comfortable, right? So if we're talking about processing emotions, so if we feel an emotion and we don't fully process it, we try to stuff it down. It doesn't just go away. It stays there, actually wreaking havoc on our body and our lives, but we're being called to process it, which means we have to feel it. The only way we can release it is feel it, and that's not comfortable. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's downright excruciating, painful. Sometimes it's fearful, but we've got to feel it to release it, and then we have to get the messages from it. Our emotions are our messengers. They let us know where we need to say no, where we need to say yes, where we need to put in a boundary or show compassion. And those actions are typically outside of our current comfort zone. So we're seeking the path of most comfort versus the path of the personal growth that part inside of us is always going to be driving us towards.
Can relate to that. I think most people can relate to the path of least resistance in order to get through a day. And I was thinking about what you said about the boundaries, and it feels in my world, and I'm sure you meet so many women, we really do struggle with the people pleasing, the not setting boundaries. A lot of this also goes back to those childhood patterns. And so I like that. Where are we not saying yet no? Where are we not saying yes? Because saying yes to things is important too, but sometimes we don't do that either. And feeling it, I think feeling it is really interesting too, because when we feel it, we forget that once we sit with it for a while, it actually lessens. It's almost like a desensitization of it, but we're so afraid because that initial feeling is hard.
Yeah, 100%. It is hard. It's really hard. And sometimes we feel like we're not going to get through it. Sometimes we feel it's such a feeling of a lack of control. And underneath it's like if I let this happen, like my whole world is going to fall apart. When in fact none of that's true, but it's the feeling that we have. But I find one of the great ways to feel those emotions sitting with them, walking in nature, I feel is a really great time because for me and a lot of my clients, like sitting in a room, it can almost feel like the walls are closing in and we almost hinder ourselves. Where when we're out in nature, nature almost helps us to kind of let those emotions flow and then we can be talking and getting the information that we have from them. Because once we get the information that that emotion has for us and we just feel it, it'll leave. It's just when we try to stop it, we're never going to be able to stop it. We're just going to keep pushing it down. And, I always say it's like we're trying to stop the smoke detector without finding the source of the smoke. It's just not going to happen.
Yes, I love walking as another way to process because I know that anytime we go out on a walk, how we're feeling going out, there's so much less pressure. And there's some science behind it that I don't fully know, but I do know the fact that our eyes are searching and our legs are moving. We've got a lot of bilateral brain movement going on. And so there's a science behind it too. It's not just because it's good for us and we're out there, but the nature part of it there is something about seeing green that you just can being in fresh air and hearing nature sounds. Wherever you go, you're gonna have hear at least a bird or a squirrel
Yes.
or something and encounter that.
Yeah, and again, I believe it goes back to that part of ourselves, the deeper part, whether you call it a heart, a soul, a spirit, whatever higher self, authentic self, whatever your word for it is, that part of ourselves, it recognizes truth and it is high vibrational, right? It is that high vibration of that light and love and so it helps it to balance. It helps that higher part of ourselves come through and really dissipate that lower energy, which is what those emotions are, right? Those emotions are a lower energy. They're literally physically weighing us down energetically, emotionally, and all of that. So, the other thing I love about walking in nature, when we are trying to change those beliefs and we're using some of our tools, when we're actually walking in nature, our whole body is involved. So it becomes not just sitting in the mind because we could do an affirmation all day in our mind, but if we don't feel it, it's not going to change. It's not going to change at all. If we're trying to change a belief, we need to actually feel what it's like to be true. So, whatever I feeling energetic and empowered in my body and free. If we're just sitting there saying it in our head, it's not going to make a change. But if we're out walking, then all of a sudden it's like something's snapping and something's clicking. We're feeling it in our body. Now we're moving towards it and we're actually changing the underlying belief.
Nice. I like that. We also so often will be told, hey, just calm your nervous system. That's going to help you so that you're not feeling so much stress and agitated and you won't get into the food. And I really want to dig into this because I know you're going to be able to help us understand this more. First of all, what is the nervous system and why is it so important for us to pay attention to?
So I think one of the most important things to recognize is that our nervous system has not fully adapted to our modern life. So back in the day, when our ancestors faced a threat, their very lives were likely on the line, whether it was an attack from a saber-toothed tiger or an attack from another tribe. So our nervous system came along and we move in it we activate the fight or flight response, right? So our body is pumped with adrenaline and cortisol, and the blood rushes to our muscles so that we are prepared to fight the danger, flee from the danger. And now we're being told we're on that heightened alert. Maybe we're going to be freezing. In today's modern world, our brain isn't often differentiating between the threat of the saber-toothed tiger and the stress of being in traffic, of a difficult email, of financial stress. So that fight or flight response gets activated. And then back in the day, in our ancestors' time, once that threat passed, life was relatively calm. Things shifted back into the parasympathetic nervous system, what we call rest and digest. Well, today's modern world, we don't have that built in. So a lot of us are in a constant level of fight or flight. And that's where to me, there's really three keys to the nervous system regulation. One is a morning reset, right? You open up your eyes in the morning before you even leave bed. You take a few minutes. I have a YouTube channel. I just started like 2 months ago. Every Monday morning, I release a 4 or 5 minute practice so that when you open your eyes before your day starts, you can align with peace, joy, abundance, whatever it is that you're getting called for so that you're not beginning the day already kicking off into that fight or flight, which then keeps us in reactivity mode. Beyond the fact that when we're in fight or flight, it's wreaking havoc on our physical body, our mental body, our emotional and our spiritual body. So we want to take those few minutes in the morning, the second part of that being that 20 to 30-minute daily practice, because again, we're giving those the avenues and the outlets. So in that time, we're moving, we're taking that time of rest. We're bringing ourselves into the parasympathetic nervous system and calming ourselves down. And then the third, what we talked about before, as we do those two things, now we have a toolkit. So now when we're sitting in traffic, instead of being in that low level fight or flight or even higher level fight or flight, we're able to, we'll take a breathing practice or we'll take a practice to be present. So again, it's all about bringing ourselves grounded and in the present moment when we're staying in that parasympathetic state. And that's where not only are we responsive to life because we're able to actually hear and actually see versus kind of being, again, reactive, but it's also where our body's natural healing ability takes place. So the body knows how to heal, but we have to give it the right conditions. So if we're constantly in that level of stress, we're creating more physical issues, more disease. When we give ourselves that time in the parasympathetic state, then our body knows how to repair the tissues and the cells and bring us back to vibrant health.
Yes. When I'm working with people too, I think of when I think of the actual letters in the words sympathetic, S, stress, and I think of us too, we're always looking in the future and
Yeah.
anxiousness. And
Yeah.
then parasympathetic has the R, the rest, but parasympathetic present because we create so much of this stress that does lead to emotional eating in that stress based on things that haven't even happened, that are not even right here in our moment, but they're either from the past or they are from the future. And what are some of the stressors of the women that you have worked with? What are some of the stressors that they're dealing with in midlife?
God, there's so many, right? A lot of my clients have also, they're dealing with major shifts. So for some, it could be a sudden, well, it's not a sudden empty nest, but it's an empty nest. And then all of a sudden, all their time where they found their value is now not there. And so we're needing to do something different. And it's that feeling of being lost and not knowing where to put the love and the passion and the purpose. So for some, it's just finding that new purpose. For a lot of other ones, I'm working with a lot of women, and it's probably because it's part of my path, but going through divorces and breakups and I'm happily married now, but I had gone through it about 12 years ago, dealt with lots of betrayal. And so I see a lot of women losing all that had been in their lives up until that point is now going away, and it's trying to find who they are, how they're going to survive sometimes, right? If your partner is the person who is financially providing, then there's fear based along that. So I see a lot of or work with a lot of women who are at the I'll call it survival, it's survival level, right? Needing to get back to the basics of grounding, getting into their truth and their purpose, finding that daily practice so that we can hear our voice and listen to our inner guidance, and then take the indicated steps versus being in this panic place and just trying to throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. It's like it's really critical in those times to be in contact with our inner voice and our higher power if one believes in that.
I think what's really hard when we're going through things like that, whether it's those are really true circumstances that people are going through, all the way up to caretaking, the disconnection that we have from ourselves and our bodies is very pronounced. We've been living for other people for a very long time. And I think it's really hard because when we are that disconnected, then of course we're disconnected with food too. And when we talk about the nervous system, and we know that we are sometimes in this really stressed, chronic stress state that you're talking about. And what if we recognize it and we can catch it? Because again, we're talking about, we know this is leading possibly to that nighttime food or emotional eating or overeating. Throughout the day, do you have a tip of something simple that we could do even if we're around other people?
Yes. And I just want to say that it absolutely leads to that. late night eating because we feel out of control and we're trying to soothe ourselves. Like really emotional eating, we're trying to make ourselves feel better, and we're trying to calm that nervous system. So during the day, there's a couple of things that I love to do. As you had mentioned before, so often we are stressing out about things from the past or things from that have already been done or things from the present that haven't happened yet and probably won't even happen. So it's about keeping ourselves present. So one very easy thing, I'm a yoga instructor. So one very easy thing I love to do is just go back to the breath, slowing down the breath. And there's some different techniques that you can use, but even just simply observing your breath, moving in your body, feeling your body lift, observing your body, your breath leaving your body. And then I always say, with each inhalation, feel yourself lifting, expanding. And then with each exhalation, you're inviting in relaxation. You're consciously releasing tension from your shoulders. You're releasing any clenching from your jaw, your face. And if we do a few, even just a few of those deep breaths, so first of all, we're giving the mind something to do that's helping us. We're putting the mind onto the breath. It's bringing ourselves in the present moment, and it's actually physically helping ourselves to relax. So just that basic breath is one of my favorites. And another way to bring yourself present is look, like you start looking around and there's a thing you can do where you look and you name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things you can touch. So anything like that that's just bringing you back into the present moment, and nobody has to know you're doing it. But as a yoga instructor, I have to say the breath and then just feeling feet on the ground, just that awareness of feet to the ground is just easy ways. Again, I'll call them simple, not easy. It's not always easy to do in the moment, but the more we practice them, the better we are at pulling them in the moment. And again, just moving back into that state of being present and responsive.
That breath is such a connection. It's amazing how, when we are doing what you are talking about, noticing it going in, coming out, it really also takes away chatter. You can't think about the things that you were thinking about when you're focused on the breath. And I find that fascinating. I find it amazing and so good for us. But we can be in a traffic jam. I teach tapping, and so I like breath work when you're in a traffic jam because people are not going to be appreciative of you tapping all over your face. And they have no idea what's going on unless you're just doing the collarbone, but we have to drive. So the breathing is really good in front of people. And also, there is a wonderful podcaster he may still be a lawyer, Jefferson Fisher, I believe is his name. And he is talking about how to deal with difficult people and dealing with conflict and things like that. And of course, I know our nervous system is just so on edge when we have to deal with those things, especially if you grew up dealing with a difficult person and it was never going to go your way. But he said your first word should always be a breath. And that's so powerful because it's that pause, and you just brought that pause right in, and even while you were talking about it, I found myself expanding and doing the breath work with you. So if you're listening, while you're listening, let's do that breath work at the same time.
Yeah. The pause is
Yes.
always where the power is, right? The pause is the power. It's where we have our awareness. It's where we're at choice. I love the pause.
That's powerful. The pause is the power, the awareness, the choice. I had to repeat that. I like that. So, I would love to switch into nourishment for just a moment. We're talking about things that we can do that are very emotionally enriching. They're the nervous system, but let's talk about physical nourishment. Do you feel that women are nourishing their bodies well during this time as they're leading into the emotional eating? What and how would you like women to be nourishing their bodies right now?
So I always work with a few pronged gradual approach. If we are emotional eating, if we're using our food, our sugar, our chemical food for soothing, we can't just rip it away, right? It's not going to work. That's where we lead into disordered eating and the whole path that takes us down. I always guide my clients towards gradually increasing those nourishing whole foods while gradually reducing the dependency on those processed, sugary, chemical foods. And at the same time, looking underneath to what's driving the unwanted behaviors. And then as we begin to heal those, whether it's the processing of the emotions or the beliefs, whatever it is, as we begin healing, then we start naturally moving towards foods that are going to fuel us. So I always say it's a few pronged approach. We're working on our self-respect. We're working on our nervous system regulation and our mindfulness work. We're working on our awareness, and we're working on our food in that gradual way. And of course, getting in movement as well as we're building up our body. And especially as we get older, we know it's critical to also be putting on muscle. So, from just a purely physical point of view, we're going to feel better. And then we have the faster metabolisms, and we're leading ourselves into better health by making sure that, 2, 3 times a week, we're getting in that resistance training, switching out the cardio. I know when we're in our 20s and 30s, a lot of us are cardio. It's
Yes.
walking, absolutely. Yoga, tai chi, anything that you love to do, absolutely. But I always say we do not need to be spending 40 minutes on the treadmill. We need to be putting that 40 minutes into resistance training and weight training.
Yes, muscle is gold. And I'm really glad you brought that up. And we can get back into movement again. I think that's just moving our bodies when we're not feeling well and not feeling good about ourselves is a challenge for people. But along with the nourishment, I love how you gradually increase the food that we know is serving our bodies. And we're gradually decreasing because, again, it's just dieting. It's just the 80s and 90s all over again. If we just say, go instant it with sugar, and we're not in this problem because of, this willpower issue. We know that. And then looking underneath is really powerful. I'm glad you have that approach. You and I have some similar feelings about intuitive eating. And I have in the past have worked with people and I had to stop using the words intuitive eating because it was also too close to the old term that people keep trying to say is moderation, but it also didn't open up all the avenues. And I want to hear your approach to this because you can do intuitive eating, but it's how people are doing it. And I know it's a very popular term. What are your thoughts on that?
So, my thoughts are true intuitive eating is great, right? We're listening to our innate body wisdom telling us what it needs. However, the challenge is that many of us have been using food for comfort, stress relief, companionship. So when the frustration or the anxiety or the loneliness or the exhaustion hits, that part of us that is seeking to be soothed can be really persuasive and convincing, and it can sound really wise. It can sound like intuition when in fact, it's actually just the protective pattern underneath trying to help us feel better in the moment. So intuition will always guide us towards what's our highest and best. But that underlying emotional eating pattern, those protective patterns, they're going to be driving us towards that immediate relief. So that's why I always recommend not beginning with intuitive eating and work on increasing those nourishing whole foods gradually, work on decreasing the other ones, get rid of that dependency. And we also know that there's a chemical and a physical dependency to a lot of these foods. So we've got to be mindful of that. We've got to be drinking our water, working on the root causes to our weight gain and emotional eating to begin with. And then we will naturally move towards something more intuitively, but you know, our intuition's never going to guide us to a Twinkie. It's just not.
I know my body feels I'm listening to my body and it feels like peanut butter cups. And that's usually what my body would go for. But I do find that interesting because we started at the very beginning talking about in this episode that 20 to 30-minute practice where we're quiet and listening to ourselves. We if we're emotionally eating, we're clearly not listening to ourselves and taking care of the deeper parts. So when we listen, we're not always getting the right signal. And emotional eating is sending the signal of the things that we do need to work on. So I appreciate your thoughts on that because I think it is a very popular term, but when you really dig deeper and you look at like the workbooks that Evelyn Triboli has done, They do go deeper. People are doing this on their own, not understanding that we do go through all the layers of emotions, body image, limiting beliefs. So thank you. That was a really interesting thought on that. And I think we need to understand when we've been dieting that we are having a subconscious response without even realizing it. Women I work with can recite calorie counts to so many foods, and they know all the perfect substitutes for all the healthy foods. They're so conditioned. How do you think that we can break down some of this conditioning that diet culture has given us? What are some things that you would love to see women doing? I know we're talking about some of these toolbox ideas, but how do we break that in our brain?
I think that we have to go back to awareness, right? We have to have the awareness of what we're doing. So if we are willing to look at our behaviors and look at what we're doing and then say, how is this making me feel? Right? Like when we're so restrictive and we know all these things and then we can't follow them, like how are we feeling when we're not feeling in our power and in our control? So it's really about coming back and stepping into the power. And I would say, it's always hard to break those things that we're so programmed to. So I love to take those questions into the mindfulness practice, right? So one of the questions that I would ask myself if that was me is, what am I getting from this? Like, what do I think I'm getting from this? What do I think is going to happen if I don't do this? Because that's where our answers are underneath. Usually those type of things are about control. And we feel safe when we're in control. We think we have control and that all these bad things can't happen because we've got it. So usually there's something underlying an issue with faith of ourselves, faith in the universe or a higher power. Like usually that's something underneath. So we just feel like as long as we have control, as long as we have control. But those are the questions that I would really bring into that daily practice. And what am I getting from this? Is this serving me? And then what one thing might I do right now that would, shift this and let the answer come from within, right? Like I'm very passionate about this. We can talk to other people, we can listen to other people, we can talk to our coaches and our friends, but our answers are always within. And that's another way to actually stay in our power too, because I don't know, I've heard this before. Well, my coach told me this, or my friend told me this, and then we move into victim mode. They told me it and it didn't work. So now we're taking all the responsibility and we're putting it on somebody else. So the responsibility has to begin and end with us. We get our information, and then what resonates, we take into that daily practice, we take into our lives, and then we listen. We create that path in that 20 to 30 minutes a day. When we start in that 20 to 30 minutes a day, it then becomes to where I am now, like I tend to hear myself all the time. I hear myself,
Yeah.
I feel myself. It's like I've been doing it for decades. So I know when I'm in alignment, when I'm going against that voice, when I'm not. So we really need to build up that connection so that we can allow ourselves to be free and not so stuck and rigid in things that aren't serving us and don't feel good.
That's really powerful. Do you think that we are actually in a special time of our lives in this age range that we automatically, even with the hormonal changes, are craving that authentic self and being it's almost like what were we like at 4 or 5? We're almost craving that. What do you think about that?
I 100% believe that that's to be true. The way I believe that that deep inner part of ourselves is here for a purpose and is here for a reason. And I think that when we're younger, it's hard to really focus on that for a lot of reasons. If we're raising families or building our careers or whatever we're doing, and then we get to this age and a lot of that other responsibilities have simmered down, or they could. We have a little bit more choice. And I believe that that part of ourselves, it wants to be living its purpose. It wants to be serving and giving back. I think a lot of people like what you and I are doing, we've gone through a big part of our life. We've dealt with a lot of stuff. We've moved through, not saying that anybody's fully through it, but I'm saying we've come down the path a bit. And then it's this call within to turn around and help others who are on the same path, but a few steps behind. It's like, I think that that very definitely comes from our heart and our soul. I think it's part of our purpose.
Yes, and I think that is part of what some women are challenged with right now is they're changing the identity. And when you mentioned, becoming an empty nester or going through a divorce and all of the above here, and it really does start making you think about, well, what's next for me? And some people who are retiring are really struggling with that too because they don't want to just sit around, and some people do. It's really whatever they're going through, but working through it. And I think the other piece that I hear when I'm listening to you is self-awareness is so connected to the emotional eating. And that when we really understand ourselves more, but like we need to accept who that is also. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but I always thought I was a very extroverted person. And I thought after menopause, that menopause was the cause of me not wanting to go out at night. I had spent my energy. I don't want to talk on the phone. I really don't want to go out unless, if some friends are having dinner, maybe I'll do that once in a while. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And one day it just came to me in my morning practice. This is just what I love. I give all my energy away during the day and I need to restore my energy at night. And there's nothing wrong with it, but this is truly where I'm happy sitting at home, crocheting, playing games on my iPad, watching TV. So the self awareness that also helped me in my emotional eating because I think when we have I love how we talked earlier about the disconnect. When there's some kind of disconnect or something that is not aligned with us, and you've used the word alignment, it creates this dissonance, and that can lead to us soon.
100%. We're looking to feel better. And it's funny, I've done the same thing. I was so extroverted when I was younger, out every single night in college and through my 20s, and now I call myself an extroverted introvert because I do give that energy, but I also change where I give it to. Like, I used to love being in big crowds, and now it if I'm with people who are choosing to be unconscious, it drains the life out of me, and I leave. I need to be also for me, my replenishment comes from being in my little home sanctuary with my animals, and that's where it comes to me, and I can't be around, I call them energy suckers, people who would
Yes.
choose to take your energy from you to make themselves feel better versus do their own inner work and get that energy coming up from within.
Yes, that is powerful. And it's everyone is on their own journey and on their own path. But when you figure out what yours is, you can unapologetically do what makes you feel better. So I have a few questions for us to round this out. Before I eat, what should I ask myself?
Well, I always love before eating to take a few breaths and ground. I'm not, I get a little concerned in asking a question because then I feel like it's giving an opportunity for the protective pattern to jump up and say, I feel like, pizza and it's because of this and this and that. So I actually like to take a few breaths and ground and really feel myself present and then make the choice.
I love that. Instead of a question, take the breath. And we'll also throw in that word that I love, the pause. So, number two, the most overlooked cause of emotional eating is.
Unprocessed emotions. They're trying to get there's listen, there's a purpose for them. They're serving a purpose. It's so they want to be expressed. They want to be processed. They want the information to be given.
Women don't need more discipline, they need more. Yes, we truthful with ourselves, really. Okay, so if you had, and you can mention any that you've already brought up because you've brought up some beautiful things for us to work on here. But if you could mention 2 to 3 things that we could start doing today or tomorrow, what would those be?
I would say start that morning reset. Whether you go onto my YouTube channel or find something else, take a few minutes to do just a very simple meditation that's going to align you with peace and calm and abundance. I would say get that 20-minute to 30-minute practice going. Create a space in your house today. It can be a corner of your desk, it can be a space in your room, it can be in your closet. Just create a little space that is going to be your place to go into every day for those 20 to 30 minutes. And if you really want to take another step, get a notebook or a journal and just start writing. 20 minutes, just write or grab a meditation. I know I've got so many.
I know some women struggle with the idea of meditation, but if you're just sitting and listening, I think that's really powerful. That is one of my favorite things I'll say today is that morning reset. And I appreciate everything because there are women in here listening. We see you. We know you're there that have made losing weight a part of their life for their entire lives, and they've made it that a part of their identity, but they've also made discipline and willpower a part of their identity, feeling like they're bad with it, bad with food, bad with willpower and discipline. So I feel that you have shared in such a compassionate, loving way, ways that we can really change our mindset and rewire, not feel that shame and guilt because we're just working on ourselves. And you've shared with us how to dig a little deeper today, too.
And I would even say to the women who are beating themselves up because it's constant failure in their eyes, it's, switch that lens. Like, think, wow, look at my perseverance. Like, look how willing I am to do what it takes to look and feel the way I want to feel. Like, give yourself credit for that. And then just recognize that you've just been putting that energy into the effect rather than the cause. So just notch it over a little bit and then move that energy towards the cause of the unwanted behaviors, and everything shifts.
Powerful. That's a great way to end. Stacey, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and bringing us a wonderful toolbox today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Will you please share with everyone where we can find you?
Yes, my website is staceypaige.com, staceypaige.com. And on there, I have a weekly newsletter that I send out once a week, which has practices, tips, and tools for everything we've been talking about. And on that website, you can connect to me through all my socials from there as well.
That's great. Thank you
Or
again
Stacey
for
Page
being here.
Inspired on that YouTube to get those little
Yes.
presets. And that's on the website as well.
And that's great. We can actually watch it on a video. And listeners, those will all be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening today. Please make sure that you follow the show because when you get those weekly downloads, we can reach more women and we can have more wonderful guests like Stacy. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nourish your entire life today and give yourself grace.